What if I told you that before Eve existed, a female voice already echoed in the darkness of creation? A voice that asked no permission, that sang of freedom while the world was still asleep. His name was silenced, distorted, transformed into fear. But she didn't disappear. Because every time a soul rises up against the currents, the echo of that voice returns. This is the Secret Song of Lilith, the forgotten goddess who dared to love herself before loving any god. And today, you will hear the forbidden sound of first night. What if, before Eve, there was another woman, a woman who dared to sing the song of freedom when silence itself still shaped the world? A woman who was not born from a rib, but from the same sacred dust that gave form to man. A voice that echoed on the first night of creation, and that time has tried to erase. But what happens when a story is silenced for centuries, and yet remains alive, hidden in the subtext of the scriptures? Have you ever felt that there's something beyond what you've been told? That there's an ancient secret vibrating among the words of the Bible, like a lost sound in the shadows of Eden? Stay with me, because what you're about to discover could completely change how you view the origins of humanity. Before the garden, before the fall, even before the name Eve, there was Lilith. His name is almost never mentioned. When it appears, it's like a whisper, a dreaded echo, a ghost of forgotten wisdom. Ancient traditions say that she was Adam's first wife, equal to him, made from the same clay, of the same divine essence. But this equality was never accepted. And when she raised her voice to declare, "We are both a reflection of the same Creator," the world trembled. Light and shadow separated for the first time. Imagine this, a female voice, wild and pure, singing in the midst of the darkness of creation. Not a song of obedience, but of awakening. A melody that spoke of freedom, strength, and awareness. This was Lilith's secret song, and it was this song that time tried to silence. But is it possible to silence the sound of the soul? Is it possible to erase the memory of a deity that represents the inner power and forgotten wisdom of both women and men? Maybe not. Perhaps that voice still lives within each of us. In those moments when we feel the urge to break free from chains, to defy fate, to remember who we truly are. For millennia, the name Lilith has been synonymous with fear. In the pages of tradition, she ceased to be a goddess and became a demon. But the truth, the one known by the ancient Gnostics, is quite different. Lilith was not darkness. She was the reflection of rejected light, the forgotten side of creation, the first spark of freedom that shone even before sin existed. What if everything you've learned about Eden was only part of the story? What if the real rebellion wasn't against God, but against the prison of ignorance? Perhaps paradise was never a lost garden, but a state of consciousness, and Lilith, the first voice trying to awaken it. Do you realize how this changes everything? How does myth become a mirror? How does the rejected woman become a symbol of the unyielding spirit? This is the essence of Lilith's song, a chant that still vibrates in the depths of the human unconscious, calling each of us to remember the forgotten truth. So, close your eyes for a moment. Imagine the sound of the wind before creation. Feel the vibration of a note that comes from afar, traversing eras, religions, and fears. It is the call of the first night. And if you listen carefully, you might realize that this song doesn't come from outside, it comes from within. Because the echo of Lilith never disappeared. He simply hoped that someone someday would be ready to listen to him again. And that time is now. And while the echo of the first night still resonates in the air, perhaps you too will feel something stirring within you, an ancient memory, a voice calling your name. Many who hear this story say they feel something awakening, as if a forgotten part of their soul begins to breathe again. And that is precisely why this space exists, to remember together. If this theme resonates with you, if, in some way, Lilith's words made you reflect on freedom, light, and shadow, leave a comment below about what touched you the most. It could be a thought, a memory, a feeling. Every comment you leave isn't just a reaction. It's a fragment of consciousness that echoes along with this message. And if you believe that stories like this need to be told, that the voice of the forgotten deserves to be heard, like this video, this simple gesture helps spread the message, awakening more people to what the world has tried to silence for so long. When you like something, the algorithm understands that this content matters, and Lilith's echo reaches new ears. And if you feel you're part of this awakening, subscribe to the channel. Here, each video is a portal, a journey through the secrets of Eden, the hidden truths of creation, and the symbols that the soul recognizes, even when the mind forgets. By subscribing, you're not just following a channel, you're joining a community of seekers, of people who, like you, feel there's something bigger behind it all. Because in the end, this journey isn't just about myths and ancient names, it's about us. About the divine spark that pulsates in every being and that, from time to time, needs to hear a reminder. You are part of creation. You are the sound that was never silenced. And while the wind blows over the ruins of Eden, Lilith's voice continues to sing, soft, persistent, eternal. She asks neither for adoration nor for forgiveness. She simply whispers, "Remember who you are." And it is precisely there, in that instant between sound and silence, that the true mystery begins to reveal itself. They say that the history of humanity began with a man and a woman in a perfect garden. But that's only the version that survived the hands of those who wrote the story. Before Eve existed, before the serpent and the fruit, there was another presence. A woman made from the same earth as Adam, molded by the same divine breath. Lilith, the name that almost no one mentions, the echo that the scriptures preferred to silence. While Adam opened his eyes and saw the light of the new world, Lilith was already walking beside him, free, curious, aware of her own power. She was not created to serve him, but to share with him the gift of creation. And it is precisely there that the story changes tone. In the oldest texts of the Hebrew tradition and in fragments of Gnostic wisdom, Lilith appears as man's first companion. Not a shadow, not an extension, but a mirror. She represented balance, the feminine and the masculine coexisting in divine equality. However, equality is something many fear, especially when power is unwilling to be shared. When Adam tried to dominate her, Lilith refused. She raised her voice, her gaze, and her soul. She said that both were born from the same dust, from the same sacred earth, and that, therefore, neither should kneel before the other. It was the first no in human history, and the universe, accustomed to obedience, trembled. From then on, silence began to form around her name. Official versions began to call her a rebel, disobedient, even a demon. But is freedom rebellion? Or is it simply the reminder that we were created with free will? Lilith did not flee Eden out of hatred. She left because paradise had become a prison. It's as if her soul chose exile, preferring the vastness of the desert to the limitation of a love that demanded submission. How many times in life do we do this too? How many times do we leave behind places, people, or beliefs that no longer fit who we have become? Tradition tells that, upon leaving Eden, Lilith did not lose herself. On the contrary, she found herself. And it was there, in the darkness of the world's borders, that her voice became eternal. The cry that many heard as a curse was in fact a song of awakening, an ancient melody that said, "Do not fear your own strength." This is the point where myth and symbol merge. Lilith becomes an archetype, not only of woman, but of any being who refuses to live in the chains of fear. She is the symbol of the spirit that chooses truth, even when that choice costs the comfort of paradise. Now, imagine the impact of that decision. A being created in the image of divinity, choosing freedom instead of obedience. This completely changes how we understand creation. What if Lilith's true sin was having consciousness? What if the mistake wasn't disobedience, but the act of seeing? The ancient Gnostic schools believed this. For them, Lilith was not a being of darkness, but one of the first reflections of inner light, the principle of gnosis, the secret knowledge that liberates. What later religions called the fall, the Gnostics called ascension. When we look through this lens, everything takes on a different meaning. The story ceases to be about punishment and becomes about transformation. Lilith becomes the first human being to choose herself. And perhaps that's why she was erased, because the idea of someone who doesn't submit frightens the power systems. This is the hidden truth behind the myth. The world has always tried to silence those who awaken too early. In essence, every time someone chooses authenticity instead of obedience, the echo of Lilith awakens again. But it's important to understand that she is not just a symbol of rebellion. She represents balance. In many ancient traditions, Lilith was not feared. She was revered as the guardian of lunar wisdom, intuition, and inner strength. Her image was distorted because the world was not ready to understand the power of integration. Light and shadow, reason and instinct, masculine and feminine, all of this lives within us. Lilith did not come to divide, but to remind us that true creation only happens when we accept both halves of the divine. This understanding changes not only our spiritual perspective, but also how we relate to life. When you understand Lilith, you understand the journey of the human soul. Birth into the light, the fall into duality, and the return to consciousness. It's the same path we all travel, leaving our comfort zone, facing inner exile, crossing the desert of our own minds, and finally, hearing the sound that calls us back home. Lilith's story is also our story. Now I want to guide you through a thought. What if Eden had never been a physical place, but a state of consciousness? In that case, Lilith wouldn't have been expelled. She would have simply crossed a portal. The portal of perception, where the human being discovers that they are not only creation, but also creator. This is the mindset that transforms myth into living wisdom. When we accept this perspective, we realize that there is no fall, only movement. And every choice, however painful it may seem, is an invitation to awaken. Many ancient texts describe how, upon leaving Eden, Lilith merged with the winds and stars, becoming a free spirit, a symbol of feminine creative power. Others say she was cursed by angels, condemned to wander in the shadows. But consider this, is exile truly a curse, or is it the price of awareness? The true spiritual journey is made of losses and revelations. Lilith faced both, and that is why her story endures through time. Through her, we learn that freedom without wisdom can become loneliness, but submission without awareness is a living death. Lilith represents the exact point between these two forces. She is the wind that blows between heaven and earth, reminding us that balance is not achieved through obedience. It is achieved through understanding. And every time someone dares to seek this truth, Eden reappears, not as a distant garden, but as the awakening of the soul. When I look at this myth, I realize it speaks of choices, the decisions that shape our reality, the truths we prefer to hide, the limits we create out of fear. Lilith transcended them all. She was the first to say, "I am whole." And perhaps that is why her song still resonates, because within every human being there is this ancient voice asking for space to exist, to express itself, to be free. Comment below. I hear the voice of Lilith. Just to show that this message also awakens something in you. Now I want to take this reflection even further. They say that when Lilith left Eden, the whole world fell silent for a moment. The wind stopped, the waters ceased their movement, and even the stars seemed to dim their light, as if creation itself wanted to hear the sound that was born at that moment. It was music, but not music made of notes or instruments. It was something older, more essential, the echo of the human soul yearning for freedom and authenticity. The forbidden song, as many would later call it. An invisible hymn that needed no voice to be heard, because it vibrated within whoever dared to listen. Some felt it as a shiver, others as unease. Some were enchanted, others frightened. But all, in some way, were touched. Lilith did not flee Eden. She departed as one awakens from a dream and realizes that paradise cannot exist at the cost of one's own essence. What she took with her was not gold nor power, but consciousness. And it was in the desert, that vast mirror between heaven and earth, that her voice found space to exist. The desert does not judge, it does not impose form. It only returns the sound it receives. And so, when Lilith first cried out her freedom, the echo responded. This echo is what we call, to this day, the Song of Lilith. A sound that transcends time, beliefs, and borders, reminding every soul that there is something greater than obedience. There is the right to be whole. The hidden truth of this myth is that this song has never stopped resonating. It is present in the moment when someone chooses to follow their own intuition, even when the world says no. It is in the small decisions that break old patterns, in the courage to speak the truth when it would be easier to remain silent. Lilith's song is, at its core, the sound of awakening consciousness, a reminder that light dwells not only in the sky, but also within every human being willing to look at themselves without fear. Some say that the echo of this melody still vibrates in the desert dawns, between dunes and winds, and that those who listen with an open heart can hear it calling their name. It's a gentle and dangerous invitation at the same time. Because when you listen, there's no way to pretend you didn't hear. Something stirs within. What was once routine becomes restlessness. What was once certainty becomes a question. It's the turning point between what we were and what we can be. From that moment on, the soul begins its true journey, not of escape, but of return. A return to its own nature, to what was hidden beneath layers of fear and conditioning. The forbidden song doesn't seek followers, it seeks awakened souls. It doesn't say obey, it says remember. Remember when your voice was free, before guilt, before labels, before comparisons. That's the message Lilith left in the air. The reminder that freedom is the soul's first language. And that's why, even among those who have never heard of her, there's a part that recognizes this vibration. It's the same impulse that makes someone abandon a meaningless path and choose a new one. The same breath that inspires artists, philosophers, seekers. A silent force that pushes each being towards authenticity. If we look closely, we will see that the myth speaks of transformation, the moment when consciousness breaks through the bubble of fear. Lilith represents the instant when the human being decides to become the author of their own story. The desert, in this sense, symbolizes the inner space of transition, where everything that is false dissolves and the true is revealed. It is not a place of punishment, but of reconstruction. It is in the void that the song finds volume. Many ancient texts describe this passage as the flight of Lilith. She is said to have risen above Eden, spreading wings of shadow and light, and disappeared towards the horizon. But what few realize is that this flight is also a psychological symbol. It represents the leap we all need to take when we decide to leave behind the comfort of the known and enter the vastness of self-knowledge. It is the risk of transformation, the crossing between dependence and autonomy, between submission and awareness. And it's curious to understand how this myth speaks to the present. We live in times when many still confuse obedience with virtue, submission with faith, silence with peace. Lilith comes as a reminder that true peace does not come from conformity, but from coherence, the harmony between what we feel, think, and do. Her song is the sound of integrity. And perhaps that's why it disturbs so much, because it calls us back to our center, to what no doctrine can define. When Lilith's song echoes within someone, it doesn't ask that person abandon the world, but rather see it with new eyes. It's as if it were saying, don't get lost in illusions. Illusions of power, of perfection, of control. Because true strength is born from vulnerability, and true light only appears when we accept to look at the shadows. That's what the myth hides behind the scenes. The wisdom that freedom is not the absence of limits, but the awareness of them. The journey of those who listen to this song is profound. With each step, old beliefs crumble, and the being begins to realize that one doesn't need to be perfect to be divine. Lilith, in her sacred solitude, understood this before everyone else. And that is why her voice, though whispered, remains alive. Because it speaks of something universal, the right to exist in fullness. This melody transcends generations and is reborn whenever someone has the courage to choose themselves. And when the soul understands this calling, there is no turning back. Freedom, once felt, cannot be forgotten. The world may try to distort it, may try to call it sin, madness, rebellion, but the heart knows it is true. The heart recognizes the sound. There is a hidden beauty in this myth. Lilith doesn't want followers, she wants mirrors. People who understand that each one carries within themselves the same divine breath that once made her sing. The sound of freedom is everywhere. In art, in nature, in love, in the courage to say no when the world demands yes. It is the sound of creation recreating itself. Perhaps that's why this story never completely disappeared. Because in each generation someone is born who, unknowingly, hears the same echo again. And suddenly something awakens. It's the same call that echoed on the first night. Remember who you are. Comment below. I hear the sound of freedom. Just to show that this song also resonates within you. Now I want to take this reflection to another level. Over the centuries, Lilith's song began to be silenced. The same voice that once echoed as a symbol of freedom was slowly transformed into noise, distorted by fears and narratives created to control. The ancient patriarchal religions, fearing the power she represented, the power of self-knowledge, of choice, of consciousness, began to rewrite her story. The name that once evoked strength and wisdom became synonymous with danger. Lilith came to be called a demon, a temptation, a forbidden shadow. And so, the woman who dared to say no became, for many, the embodiment of evil. But hidden truth never disappears. It merely changes form. Behind the scriptures condemning her, a silent trace of reverence persisted. In ancient Gnostic and Kabbalistic traditions, Lilith was not feared, but understood. She represented the forgotten side of creation, the feminine principle of night, the mystery that balances the light of day. While official theology attempted to erase her presence, initiates saw her as the guardian of the shadow, the one who dwells in the background of consciousness and guides the soul through the labyrinths of its own darkness. It's curious to think that what the world called a demon was, in fact, the first mirror of the human soul. Lilith reflected everything that man didn't want to see in himself: desire, pride, instinct, independence. And that's why she was rejected. It was easier to call her an enemy than to admit that she represented something essential. Demonization was a collective protection strategy. By projecting onto her everything that was wrong, humanity maintained the illusion of purity. But this purity, built on denial, has always exacted its price. For centuries, the fear of the shadow fueled temples, empires, and dogmas. The story of Lilith was used to teach submission and guilt, especially to women. Her image became a warning. What happens to those who rebel against the established order? But time, patient, always brings the truth to the surface. And today, when we look again at this myth with awakened eyes, we realize how much it speaks of balance. Lilith is not the enemy of light. She is the space where light is born. In many mystical traditions, there is a profound understanding that there is no enlightenment without descent into one's own inner hell. It is in confronting the denied parts that the soul finds its wholeness. Lilith is that portal. She represents the crossing between superficial consciousness, which seeks to be accepted, and deep consciousness, which seeks to be true. Her exile was not punishment, but initiation. She was expelled from Eden only to discover that true paradise lies within, not without. In the spiritual backstage of human history, Lilith has become the great teacher of integration. She teaches that light without shadow is blindness, and shadow without light is despair. Therefore, in ancient Kabbalistic rituals, she is invoked not to be feared, but to be understood. Her energy is seen as that of the primordial force that compels us to look at what we repress. Instead of pushing away pain, she transforms it into wisdom. Instead of denying desire, she converts it into creation. This is why many initiates call her she who awakens. Modern thinking still carries remnants of this ancestral fear of darkness. We are afraid of feeling anger, afraid of making mistakes, afraid of admitting what we truly want. But Lilith emerges as a reminder: nothing human is unworthy. What causes destruction is not the shadow itself, but ignorance about it. By hiding it, we empower what we fear most. By accepting it, we dissolve the power of illusion. Lilith represents this revelation. The courage to look at oneself in one's entirety, light, shadow, and everything that exists between the two. If we look closely, her demonization says more about us than about her. Society has always needed villains to justify its fear of power. The same pattern repeats itself. What is too strong, too free, is labeled as dangerous. This was the case with prophets, with mystics, with women who dared to think. The figure of Lilith is the archetype of this hidden truth. What the world rejects is exactly what the world most needs to integrate. The spiritual journey, in its essence, is not an escape to the heights, but a conscious descent. It is descending into one's own depths to reclaim what we have left lost. Lilith is the guide for this dive. She invites us to walk through the deserts of the soul and discover that hell is not punishment, it is a mirror. Suffering is not punishment, it is language. Every pain, every fall, every loss is an invitation to truly know oneself. And the soul that accepts this call discovers that the shadow also holds light, a more discreet, more serene light, but infinitely more real. There is a powerful lesson in this myth. Redemption does not come from denying the darkness, but from transforming it into awareness. The shadow, when embraced, ceases to be an enemy and becomes an ally. Lilith does not destroy, she reveals. That is why her energy is frightening, because it does not mask, does not soften, does not promise comfort. It shows what is. And that is the first step towards true transformation. The impact of this understanding is immense. It changes our mindset, changes our decisions, changes the way we see ourselves and others. When we understand that evil is not an external force, but a reflection of what we ignore within ourselves, we regain the power to create reality consciously. Lilith, in this sense, is the archetype of spiritual responsibility. She doesn't save, she awakens. She doesn't judge, she mirrors. She doesn't imprison, she liberates. Perhaps that's why, in times of transition and collective awakening, her presence is felt again. Not as a religious figure, but as a psychological and energetic symbol of integration. She emerges when the world is ready to look at itself without masks. And that is exactly what we are experiencing now. A moment when humanity needs to reconcile opposites, to understand that shadow is not the end of light, but the path to it. Throughout history, every time they tried to destroy Lilith, she was reborn stronger. Because what she represents is indestructible. It is the soul's instinct for truth, the reminder that the sacred dwells not only in the heights, but also in the depths. And it is there, where few dare to look, that true freedom reveals itself. Comment below. I embrace my light and my shadow, just to show that you also understand the power of this integration. And since we're here, between light and dark, between heaven and desert, I want to cross this next layer of revelation with you. When the ancient Gnostics spoke of Lilith, they did not see her as a fallen being, but as a symbol of that which awakens. For them, Lilith represented gnosis, the knowledge that is born from within and not from without, that which is not learned in temples or books, but in the silent depths of one's own soul. She is a reflection of a forgotten wisdom, prior to any doctrine. A knowledge that does not need to be proven because it is felt. The voice of Lilith, from a Gnostic perspective, is not against God. It is a call to remember the God within you. And this is perhaps the greatest spiritual secret of all time. The divine has never been outside. It has always dwelt within us, waiting to be remembered. Gnosis is the spark that breaks the cycle of unconscious repetition. It is the moment when the human being stops merely believing and begins to perceive. The difference between blind faith and living wisdom. While faith accepts what it is told, Gnosis investigates what it feels. It is not satisfied with ready-made answers. It seeks the hidden meaning behind each experience. And Lilith, in all her sacred rebellion, represents this inner movement. The impulse to question, to look beyond, to pierce the veil of appearance. When she rises in Eden and says, "We are equal," it is not an affront, it is a revelation. She is saying, "The divine light that dwells in you is the same that dwells in me." This is the true inner awakening. The moment you realize that the Creator is not only above, but pulsates in your every breath. That paradise is not a distant garden, but a state of awakened consciousness. Lilith is the living reminder that the separation between human and divine is merely an illusion. That is why her voice was silenced, because she threatened the structure of spiritual control. When someone understands that they can access the sacred without intermediaries, power changes hands. The temple ceases to be a place and becomes the body itself, the mind itself, the heart itself. But Gnosis is not an easy path. It demands courage. Because knowing oneself means dismantling disguises, facing the mirror without spiritual makeup. And that mirror, as the myth shows, is Lilith, that gaze that penetrates the mask and asks, "Who are you beyond what they said you should be?" It is an intimate confrontation, a rite of passage between innocence and consciousness. Lilith offers no consolation, she offers truth. And truth, when it arrives, dismantles everything that is false. In Gnostic schools, it was said that the human soul is like a sleeping star that has forgotten its origin. Lilith would be the breath that awakens this star, the call that echoes from the unconscious to the conscious. She brings no commandments, but memories. Memories of a time when there was no guilt, only presence. When love was pure exchange, not debt. When the divine and the human were the same dance. This memory is what the Gnostics called inner light. And awakening to this light is true redemption. Not that imposed by fear, but conquered by consciousness. Lilith's spirituality is not based on worship, but on communion. She doesn't ask you to kneel, she asks you to stand up. She doesn't promise heaven, but reveals that heaven already exists within those who awaken. That's why her archetype is unsettling. It dissolves dependence. And the world, accustomed to structures of hierarchy and obedience, fears the autonomous. It fears the human being who thinks for themselves. But it is precisely this being that Gnosis wants to form, the one who doesn't need to choose between reason and faith, because they understand that both are expressions of the same consciousness. When the soul comes into contact with this kind of wisdom, everything around it begins to change. Perception expands. Life ceases to be a series of chance occurrences and becomes a field of revelations. Small events gain meaning, coincidences become messages, the everyday becomes a mirror. Gnosis doesn't change the outside world, it changes the inner perspective. And this new perspective has creative power. It transforms pain into direction, loss into learning, chaos into birth. What once seemed like punishment becomes initiation. The Gnostic journey is a journey of peeling away layers. With each layer that falls away, guilt, fear, self-deception, the being draws closer to its original center. Lilith, in her symbolic role, is the force that aids in this purification. She pushes us inward, even when we want to flee. She shows us that the sacred is not found in the heights, but in the depths of human experience. And when this plunge happens, when we finally allow ourselves to descend without resistance, something extraordinary occurs. We discover that the abyss was not an enemy, but a portal. This is the paradox of true wisdom. Only those who face the darkness know the value of light. Only those who lose control understand what trust is. Only those who empty themselves can be filled with what is real. Lilith teaches all this without words. She teaches through her presence, and this presence manifests itself in simple moments. When you choose honesty over appearances, when you decide to forgive yourself, when you feel love for something you once feared. These are the signs of Gnosis in action. There is a silent beauty in this process. It's as if, with each new awakening, humanity remembers that it was never separate from the divine. What has changed is only the perspective. Lilith's voice whispers, "You are not against God. You are his reflection." This understanding dissolves centuries of guilt and restores to us the power to create reality consciously. Guilt paralyzes, knowledge liberates. Blind obedience imprisons, understanding awakens. And perhaps this is what so many traditions have feared. The moment when humankind would realize that it no longer needs to ask permission to exist. That it can honor the sacred without denying itself. That it can love without submitting. That it can err and still remain divine. Lilith represents this spiritual maturity, the point at which the soul ceases to be an obedient child and becomes a conscious creator. She is the archetype of divine responsibility, the reminder that free will is not punishment, but an invitation. This is the true transformation, when we stop seeking God outside ourselves and begin to recognize him within. It is at this moment that the veil is torn, that fear dissolves, that separation ends. And everything that once seemed distant reveals itself as part of us. Lilith is the guardian of this memory. She guides us through the darkness not to lose us, but to return us to the luminous center that has always been ours. Write this down. I remember the light within me, just to mark that this awareness has also awakened in you. And since we've touched the heart of this mystery, I want to cross the next portal with you. The one where the echo of Lilith ceases to be a symbol and transforms into a living presence within humanity. When Lilith's story transcends time and reaches us, something curious happens. She ceases to be merely a myth and begins to act as a mirror. A mirror that reflects not the past, but the present, and everything we still need to recognize in ourselves. Today, Lilith lives in the subtext of modern life. She appears in the woman who finds her own voice after years of silence, in the man who decides to question what he has always accepted, in the artist who creates without asking permission, in the human being who awakens and realizes that they were not born to follow molds. The echo of Lilith is in every act of silent courage, in every soul that chooses authenticity instead of appearance, essence instead of approval. That's why her presence is so relevant today. Lilith is not a distant figure, locked away in the scrolls of antiquity. She is a living force within humanity, an archetype that pulsates in all who feel there is something wrong with simply fitting in. Her energy manifests in the invisible, in decisions that no one applauds, in moments when a person looks in the mirror and silently decides to be true to themselves. Society has changed, but the structure that tries to contain the free spirit still exists. And that is why the myth of Lilith never fades. She keeps returning because her story is also our story. Lilith's voice is a constant reminder that freedom is not a privilege, but a state of consciousness. When someone awakens to this truth, life changes its rhythm. Priorities are rearranged, fear loses ground, and the gaze begins to see beyond appearances. This is not spiritual theory, it is practical experience. Just observe. The number of people seeking self-knowledge, revising beliefs, questioning traditions, broadening their vision of the sacred. All this is a reflection of the same movement that began in Eden when a woman said no. That no was not the end of obedience, it was the beginning of consciousness. Today, that same echo manifests itself in social struggles, in transformations of mentality, in movements of empowerment and emotional freedom. But beyond the banners, there is something more subtle, an inner transformation that happens in the depths of each being who decides to look at themselves head-on. Lilith is there, not as a distant goddess, but as the spark of autonomy. She is the voice that whispers in the soul when you feel you need to change course, when you understand that you can no longer live automatically. That is the true revolution she inspires, the revolution of consciousness. And perhaps the most powerful part of all this is realizing that Lilith's echo doesn't belong to one gender. It doesn't speak only to women, it speaks to the human being that exists in each of us. It speaks to the man who learns to listen to his own sensitivity without fear, to the woman who reconnects with her own strength without needing to harden herself, to the child who grows without extinguishing her intuition. Lilith is the archetype of integration. She doesn't separate, she reconciles. She teaches that freedom and love are not opposites, but parallel paths. That strength without empathy is tyranny, and empathy without strength is submission. In the balance between the two, true wisdom is born. There is something profoundly human in this memory. Because all of us, at some point, have felt the weight of having to hide parts of who we are to fit into small spaces. We have all worn masks to be accepted, disguised dreams to appear prudent. And it is precisely in this moment of suffocation that Lilith's echo is heard, soft, persistent, calling back to authenticity. She doesn't shout, she doesn't demand, she only whispers. Remember who you are. And when we hear that, something inside reorganizes itself. This voice has power because it speaks of real transformation, not the kind made of speeches, but of decisions. The kind of change that happens silently, in the simplest moments. When you choose to respect yourself, when you say what you feel, when you stop justifying your own brilliance. It is in these gestures that the myth becomes life. With each conscious choice, Lilith sings again, and the world listens, even if it doesn't realize it. Humanity advances a little every time someone chooses to be true to themselves. Behind the scenes of history, this echo has been the driving force behind all spiritual evolutions. When Buddha distanced himself from palaces, when Christ questioned the Pharisees, when ancient philosophers sought the meaning of existence, there was something of Lilith's energy there, the same courage to break with the system to reach the essence. It's as if she were the archetypal impulse that pushes humankind toward expansion. And this impulse never dies, it only changes form. Today it appears in people who exchange competition for awareness, consumption for presence, appearance for purpose. The impact of this awakening is profound. It changes the way we relate to each other, how we work, how we dream. Because when the soul remembers its freedom, it no longer accepts lies as shelter. And little by little, everything that doesn't vibrate with this new frequency begins to dissolve. Unbalanced relationships transform or end. Purposeless professions lose meaning. Old patterns break. It's painful at times, but it's necessary. The process of remembering who we are is also the process of unlearning what we never were. And here is the most beautiful point of this whole journey. Understanding that there is no separation between myth and us. Lilith is not outside observing. She manifests herself through our experiences. Every time you choose truth, she breathes. Every time you break free from a mental prison, she awakens. Every time you embrace what you once judged in yourself, she smiles. Because her song has always been collective, a melody made of human fragments trying to reunite. Perhaps that's why, even after millennia, this story still fascinates. It carries a wisdom that time cannot erase. The reminder that liberation is an internal movement, not an external gift. When we understand this, we stop waiting for the world to change in order to live freely. We become the change. The myth becomes a mirror, and the mirror a portal. And if we stop for a second, we can feel it. Deep down, there's a sound that never ceases, a soft, almost imperceptible echo, calling each soul by name. It's the sound of authenticity, of courage, of awakening. The sound of Lilith within us. Comment below. I hear that echo, just to show that that voice also speaks within you. And since this vibration continues to resonate, I want to open with you the next layer of this journey, where Lilith's song transforms into sacred remembrance. The return to the inner Eden. Perhaps Eden was never a place. Perhaps it has always been here, silent, waiting for humankind to remember where it came from. Because Eden is not a garden lost in time. It is a state of the soul, a space of consciousness that still pulsates within us. And Lilith's song is a reminder that the path back begins within. There are no golden gates, nor guardian angels with fiery swords. The true gate is invisible, and it opens the instant we choose to look inward with sincerity. That is the return to Eden, the moment we stop searching outside for what has always been within. When you understand this, everything changes. The idea of separation dissolves. What once seemed distant, God, the divine, love, peace, reveals itself as part of your own being. Eden is not a geographical territory. It is a frequency. And every thought, every gesture, every conscious decision becomes a key to tuning back into that frequency. It is not a physical return. It is a remembrance. Lilith was not expelled from it. She merely traversed oblivion to show us that paradise cannot be possessed, only awakened. Deep down, we all carry this same longing, the desire to return home, even without knowing where it is. This mysterious yearning, this emptiness that nothing seems to fill, is the soul trying to remember its inner Eden. And it is at this point that Lilith's story ceases to be just a myth and transforms into a spiritual map. The path she traveled, from creation to fall, from rebellion to awakening, is the same one we all tread, in different forms. We are fragments of the same journey. Lilith's exile, seen with new eyes, is not punishment. It is initiation, because consciousness needs to lose itself in order to find itself. It needs to cross the desert of doubt, of ego, of illusions, until it rediscovers the unchanging truth. That is why her song never dies. Because it speaks precisely of this journey, of the sound that arises when inner silence transforms into wisdom. In each era, in each generation, someone hears this call and awakens. And when they awaken, they remember that paradise was never taken from us. We have only forgotten the way back. This path is made of subtle choices. It's deciding to live with more presence, with more love, with more authenticity. It's choosing the truth, even when it hurts. It's embracing the shadow, not as an enemy, but as part of the learning process. It's understanding that good and evil, light and dark, masculine and feminine, all of this exists within us, and balance is what restores our fullness. This is true gnosis, the reminder that the divine is not on a distant throne, but in the heart that opens itself. Lilith represents this moment of reconciliation. She is not the opposite of Eve, nor the enemy of Adam. She is the bridge, the memory of what we were before guilt, the feminine principle that refuses to be forgotten. And when this memory awakens, something illuminates within us. Duality dissolves, and life regains its original flavor. It's as if an old song, which had always been playing softly, suddenly gets louder. And we recognize the melody. It was there all along, traversing eras, religions, and hearts, waiting for the right moment to be heard again. This is the power of Lilith's symbol. It doesn't ask for faith, it asks for listening. Listening to the silence, to the subtext, to the feelings that arise without explanation. That's where Eden resides. Not in the promises of the future, nor in the memories of the past, but in the present moment, in the now. And when humankind finally learns to inhabit this now with awareness, the entire creation reorganizes itself. It's as if the universe sighs with relief, recognizing that one of its fragments remembered the original song. But the return is not linear. It happens in spirals. There are days when we feel at peace, and others when chaos reigns again. And that's okay, because the inner Eden is not static perfection, it's movement. It's the dance between fall and rise, between forgetting and remembering. What matters is not never getting lost, but never giving up on returning. Lilith teaches this. She teaches us to remain searching even when faith wavers. She teaches that error is also a path, and that all pain contains a piece of revelation. Perhaps that's why her song never gets old, because it speaks of that which is eternal. It doesn't belong to a religion, nor to a people, nor to an era. It is the voice of humanity remembering the divine. It is the sound of the soul returning home. Each time someone awakens, the song grows stronger. Each time a consciousness is illuminated, Eden expands within everyone. It's as if the universe itself were in the process of remembering, a collective memory resurfacing, a symphony being tuned again. And when that understanding arrives, everything takes on a different meaning. Exile becomes purpose. The fall becomes impetus. Pain becomes a portal, because nothing is truly lost. Not paradise, not love, not purity. Everything remains here, waiting for the gaze to become innocent again, not out of ignorance, but out of wisdom. Conscious innocence is the state of restored Eden, the ability to see the world with reverence, even knowing its shadow. It is the point where duality reconciles and the soul rests. The return to Eden doesn't happen all at once. It begins with small awakenings, a conversation that touches the heart, a silence that reveals something new, a memory that suddenly makes sense. And without realizing it, we return, not to the past, but to the origin of who we are. Eden was never a garden surrounded by walls. It was always the natural state of awakened consciousness. Lilith guides us to it not with promises, but with truths. Truths that hurt, but liberate. Truths that break, but heal. And when we finally listen with our hearts, we realize that Lilith's song is not one of revolt, but of love. Love for freedom, for truth, for creation. Love for remembering that each of us carries within us the same divine breath that shaped the universe. And it is this love that leads us back to the center. Not romantic, conditional love, but the love that recognizes and integrates. The love that forgives without submitting, that heals without erasing history, that transforms without denying what was. Perhaps, in the end, this is what the myth has always tried to tell us. Eden was never lost. It is we who forgot who we were when we still walked hand in hand with divinity. Lilith simply remembered first. And that is why her voice continues to echo. She sings so that we too may remember. Write this down. I remember Eden within me. Just to mark that this old song has also found a place in your heart. And since this memory has resurfaced, I want to continue exploring with you what happens when this awareness spreads. When the awakened human being begins to transform the world around them simply by existing in fullness. You know, if you've made it this far, it's because some part of this journey has truly touched something within you. And that's exactly why I want to extend a simple but sincere invitation to you. If this content resonated with you, if it opened some inner door, if it reminded you of something you might not even have known you'd forgotten, consider subscribing to the channel. Not as an automatic gesture, but as a way to continue walking together along these paths of mystery, awareness, and revelations that almost no one talks about, but that so many people feel. Here, each video is a continuation of that same search, that same awakening. And of course, if you felt that connection, leave a like too. Not for me, but because it helps that energy reach more people who might be going through the same invisible process you just experienced here. It's a gentle way to keep that thread burning. Oh, and tell me in the comments that you made it to the end. Right. I walked to the final portal. It's the most beautiful way to know that you've been with me every step of the way on this journey. And if there's still a little space inside you wanting to explore more, there's a video right here that complements all of this. Click and continue with me there. The journey only gets deeper with each step.